My name's Stephanie. I work with Climbing the Seven Summits. I'll be your host today. And we have Kat and Lisa who are going to introduce themselves in just a moment. So let's go ahead and jump on into our agenda. And here's what we have on deck. There's a ton of information we're going to cover. Everything from training and nutrition all the way down to going to the bathroom and having your period out on the mountain. So lots of things to talk about today. We're going to kick things off with really talking about who inspires us. And we really want to continue to be on a positive note today. So we'll talk about inspiring women. We'll talk about the landscape of women in the big mountains today and in the past and talk about how that's changed. Then we're going to get into the nitty gritty. We're going to talk about training, nutrition, gear, downsuits, zippers, all that good stuff. We'll close out that conversation with the mental game and speaking up before we go into some really women-specific topics that I know a lot of times aren't discussed by folks, but we're here to have these discussions. Going to the bathroom, having your period, going through perimenopause, going through menopause, all of that stuff. And then we wrap up the whole webinar today with community mentorship, even thinking about maybe guiding in the future. I think that's really exciting. And then we'll talk about all women's climbs, our philosophy at Climbing the Seven Summits, and how to get in contact with us, Kat or Lisa. Today, when we are doing this, we might not go into the detail you all quite need for some of these if you have a very specific question. We are going to give contact information at the end to follow up. Also, there is a slew of webinars we already have on our YouTube about training, about nutrition. So those will also be great spots. So if we don't quite go to the depth or answer your specific question, please follow up with us so we can get that question answered and take a look at our other resources. So before we get started with introductions, I just want to give a moment of appreciation for everyone that's here today. We're all here because we're women who oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes have unique and different experiences in the big mountains. Sometimes these experiences are so good and lift us up. Sometimes they're awfully trying. We can struggle with things like managing our cycle to feeling like the imposter syndrome. Sometimes it's on the flip side, those good things where we're harnessing our endurance and our ability to persevere through hard times. And that makes us an incredible mountaineer, to also using our abilities to be mindful, detailed, and really thoughtful and driven in all of our endeavors. So today, we really want to celebrate and uplift women in the outdoors and hopefully give you all some useful tools and resources to support your journey. We make up the big group. There's 300 some odd ladies registered. I think what this means is women in the big mountains isn't just an idea. It's happening. It's here. We're a force of nature, and we are changing the landscape of the community. We're flipping old narratives, we're taking up space, and we're finding our community together, which I really love. So with no further ado, I do want to give the chance for our two incredible presenters today who are outdoor professionals, Kat and Lisa, years of experience under their belt, a chance to go ahead and introduce themselves. Kat and Lisa both represent the caliber of people we work with at CTSS, whether it's a male or a female guide or professional. And so they really do represent them, and I'm honored to be presenting alongside of them. So, Kat, you recently returned from the Khumbu Valley where you guided our Everest Base Camp trek in Nepal. That was a co-ed trek, but you've also had all sorts of time on Mount Baker, like right here. I think you were on this climb.
I think so too.
Yeah, leading our all-women's expeditions. Can you tell us more about your background, not only in the mountains, but also in all women's spaces, so we can get to know you a little bit better?
Yeah, I'd love to. Well, I'm Kat Schomburg. I have been grown and raised in Bellingham, Washington. Yeah, I've been an outdoor mountain professional for over 14 years. So if you Google me, one of the first things you'll see is my massage therapy business. I am a licensed massage therapist. But you'll also see right there next to that is Climbing the Seven Summits. I've worked for other programs like Inspiring Girls Expeditions. I've been a gear tester and write reviews for Outdoor Gear Link. There's even an article I think I saw in there about forest school I started for young children during COVID called the Mossy Mentors. I'd say that my path to becoming a mountain guide has been really non-linear, but it's been really wholesome. And I think it's helped me be a whole person and bring all of my attributes to the table when I am guiding and when I am on big mountains. So to be like a little bit more concise about my experience in the mountains, I've guided extensively in the Cascade Range since 2017. Mount Baker is my home mountain, and it is the place that I will always return to. I love guiding the all-women's trips on Mount Baker with Climbing the Seven Summits and also the co-ed climbing academies as well. I have worked with Climbing the Seven Summits in Everest Base Camp in Nepal, and that is just so special. Personally, my climbing has taken me all over the world, down to the volcanoes in Ecuador, big wall climbing in Yosemite, doing more like technical mixed alpine routes in BC and Washington and Colorado and Patagonia, kind of just like all over the place. But I feel like I have to kind of speak to this because I'm showing up and I really wanted to bring some of my mountaineering gear with me. But unfortunately, it's on my boats. The last 2 years, I've done a deep dive in becoming a sailor. And so I actually just finished a 22-day passage just the other week, sailing from Mexico to Hawaii. And I've brought so many of my skills as a mountaineer and big mountain climber to that. So being diverse is part of what I think it means to be a mountaineer and a woman in the mountains these days.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Kat. And I'm glad you are joining us after your big journey across the ocean. We're really appreciative. Alrighty, so Lisa's the founder of Alpine Athletics. She is the author of all of our program-specific training guides. So if you sign up for a climb with us, you get a wonderful training program that Lisa designed, published, and curated for us, which we love. I'm remiss to say she's one of the best mountain trainers out there, male or female. She's a world-class guide as well. Just like Kat, she's guided across the world. I'm going to let her tell you that, but you'll see a number of pictures from Lisa when she's guided on Ecuador, some of the volcanoes there with climbing the 7 summits.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie, and thanks everyone for being here. It's fun for me to share what I know and have learned in the mountains with other cool women. I started climbing in 2008 on Rainier. I live in Seattle, so that's sort of my home mountain, and really just became enthralled with this idea of pushing myself in the mountains. Eventually climbed all of the 7 summits and then climbed K2 in 2018. And while I was at K2 Base Camp, I started the idea for Alpine Athletics, which is the company that I run today. And we're focused on coaching men and women to climb mountains all over the world and help them get prepared, not just physically, but also tactically and mentally. I still am climbing and have become more and more interested in recent years in organizing and leading all women's expeditions where we, not just the climbers are female, but the entire team is female as well. And many of those expeditions also provide some amount of support, financial support, to a women's organization in the country that we're climbing in. So that's become really special for me. So I've partnered with CTSS and climbed in Ecuador. I've climbed in Nepal and Mexico and in the Cascades as a part of an all-women's group. And so it's fun just to be on this webinar and kind of add this as one more way to give back to women and support women in mountaineering.
Awesome. So, folks, we're going to jump on into it. We want to take that moment right now and appreciate women who come before us or are still actively climbing all around us right now. So we're going to acknowledge a couple of our heroes, inspiration, women who have inspired us in the big mountains that are breaking the glass ceiling and making waves in this world. Kat, I think you're going to kick us off with the women you selected.
Yeah. So, gosh, this was a really fun question for me to sit with. And there's so many people that have come up and come to mind, but I wanted to go with one of my personal mentors. So my second job in the mountains was with Outward Bound, and I was given a small notebook called Tricks of the Trade. And it was a manual for learning how to not just teach students how to do stuff in the mountains, but how to actually enrich their lives with it. I could just flip through the different sections and find simple lessons that exemplified some of the pillars that the program is based upon. So courage and leadership, environmental stewardship, safety, challenge, diversity and inclusion, reflection and transference. And I owe that notebook and the woman who wrote it, Judith Robertson, so much gratitude because it gave me the tools to not just be in the mountains for 3 weeks with teenagers, but also how to change lives and how to really step up as a mentor. And to this day, I still bring some of those lessons onto my trips in Nepal and on my Alpine academies. So a decade after getting this notebook, I actually got to work alongside Judith Robertson on a semester course with students for that program. And I now have the privilege of calling her my mentor and a friend. Judith has served for the Outward Bound community for over 30 years as a trainer and course director. And every year she shows up with such a beautiful, renewed sense of passion and excitement. She is such a master of mountain metaphors and deeply cares about her internal journey. and everyone's internal journey that they go on in the mountains. And for me, that has brought such a beautiful element of the feminine way back into the mountains for me as I worked through being a mountain, like a professional mountain guide, and also like bring the heart space more forward. And I think that's really important to continue bringing forward for women in big mountains.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Lisa, we're going to cruise right over to you.
Yeah, so I have a lot of heroes, but to focus on just one, for me, it's Faye Fuller. So she was the first woman to summit Rainier, and she did it when she was 20 in 1890. So 135 years ago. And when I'm having a hard day in the mountains, I will often think about the women and men who came before me and how much more difficult it was for them to climb with the gear and the knowledge that they had at the time. So in 1890, there was no sunscreen, there was no Gore-Tex. She wore flannel pants and a flannel bloomer skirt and a straw hat and tied a hemp rope around her waist and climbed to the top of Mount Rainier. She also refused any help from her male teammates. So they wanted to like help her with her pack or help her, navigate crevasses. And she totally refused to have any help from them, which is something I have to say I've done as well. So I really admire just the tenacity and the guts for anyone to climb at that time, but especially for a woman to do it when that wasn't something that women commonly did. She continued to climb after Rainier to promote women in mountaineering, and she participated in founding the Washington Alpine Club and some other clubs in the area after she summited Rainier. So she is who I look for inspiration to when I'm having a tough day in the mountains.
Wonderful. Awesome. I love this inclusion of someone so historical who really paved a way for all of us to come after. So I chose somebody too. I couldn't help myself. This was too fun of a conversation to see myself out of. So I chose somebody that has recently climbed with Climbing the Seven Summits, Eva Steinwald. She's on a personal mission to climb all 7 summits by the age of 70. Well, that in its own right is incredible, and that inspires me. I think having chatted with Eva, having met her a few times, she started climbing at the age of 60, which is what I find truly inspiring and just absolutely defying the odds and taking up this new space for herself. So she's not letting the stereotype, her mindset, all these types of things run rampant in her brain. She really went ahead and laced up her mountaineering boots at 60 years old. And here she is. I think it was 63. She is now summited Everest. She summited Denali, and she summited Aconcagua. She started with the hardest ones because she is younger right now and she's only getting a little bit older. So she's doing it in a little reverse order. So Eva's been a constant source of inspiration, and I've just been honored to be able to chat with her and get to know her. The voice that she has on social media and things like that is just, it's so calming. It's so articulate that everything she does is with mindfulness, with thoughtfulness. And I just really appreciate that. We wrote a blog about Eva and her ascent on Everest if you want to read more about her. But all of this is to say women bring all sorts of things to the mountain. We bring the feminine to the mountain. We bring our passion, our excitement. We break the ceiling. We pave roads so other women can come after us. We take up space where other people thought we might not be taking up space, just like Faye Fuller did. And we defy the odds in the outside eye, but also defy the odds within our own selves and within our own mindsets today. So this is what we wanted to start with, is thinking about what all do women bring to the mountains. I'm going to go ahead and flip this over to Lisa. Lisa's going to be talking about what do women in the mountains, what does this landscape look like? What does it look like in the past? What does it look like in the modern day right now? We only can go back so far because records are only kept so far. And we can't always look at every mountain. Denali, because the national park is there, it does a fantastic job of keeping records. And so does the country of Nepal, which we so appreciate. So I went ahead and just pulled Denali and Everest numbers, and Lisa is going to jump on in here and tell us more about this.
Yeah, I love looking at the progression, and I also love starting with some history. So I took a look back at the first ascent and the first female ascent of both of these peaks. So for Denali, the first ascent occurred in 1913. And 34 years passed before the first female ascent, which was Barbara Washburn in 1947. So quite a span of time there. It wasn't quite as long for Everest. The first ascent there, as we probably all know, was in 1953. And the first female ascent was from a Japanese woman named Junko Tabe, and she summited Everest in 1975. So I always like to see what the spread is between when a man summited and the first female summited. But if we look at the numbers in Denali, looking back to 2002, only 9% of the registered climbers were female. And that has increased over time. So you can see if we look at 2023, the total was 19%. So progress for sure, but still very far from equity. And there's a similar trend with Everest. In fact, the same numbers, which I find interesting. So in the early 2000s, it was 9%, and then in 2019, 19%. So we're moving in the right direction, but still a long way to go in terms of encouraging and supporting more women in the mountains. When I started climbing, I very often was the only woman on the expedition, and it's changing, but slowly. I think it's good to see guide companies like CTSS promoting more women in the mountains and creating spaces and recognizing what women need in order to feel safe and confident in the mountains. I think just for us as women, what we learn and gain in the mountains helps us not just as climbers, but also as leaders, as storytellers, as decision makers. And I like to think that we're not just climbing mountains, but we're really shifting what leadership looks like for women. So let's hope that this webinar helps to support and promote more women to get out there.
Awesome. And
I was just going to swing over to Kat and see if she, as a guide, had any, what has your experience been like as you've been guiding? How have you seen things change?
Yeah, I definitely have big things change. I guess I want to start off by saying that my first technical training as a professional was also with Outward Bound. I'm bringing Outward Bound up a lot, but that was in 2014, and 9 out of 11 trainees were women, which
Wow.
is so unheard of. And it's never been like that. I was like a unicorn group, but I think that significantly helped me feel like I belonged. When I transitioned into technical mountain guiding and working for AMGA accredited companies, the in-house training, I think there was, in my initial in-house group, I think there was 14 of us and 3 were women, including myself. And we were showing up for different reasons. And so it was hard and it was cutthroat. It felt like competition. There wasn't camaraderie between us. And it felt like at that time, you could be the token female that was on the trip, but how do you interact with another female? It's there was only so much space, it felt like.
Yeah.
And that's really changed. In 2019, I felt a really big shift. And now there's so much more opportunity, which we will, continue to share as this webinar goes on. But it is really shifting and it's so exciting and it feels so good. And it's so nice to be able to, as a guide, say that I want to do a trip and have it be co-ed and know that I'm probably not going to be the only female. My first time guiding Denali, I was the youngest and only female on the trip. And it was really hard. I mean, it's a hard mountain, but I think just that dynamic was really, really challenging.
That makes sense. We did get one question that is really directly related to what you're talking about, Kat. This person just got back from Denali, 16 days. They were the only women on the team at 8. The question is, why? Why are women underrepresented?
Yeah, I feel like I had some reflections on that and thinking about, my first training with Outward Bound, how women were the majority in that group. And I was wondering, why was that? And for that program, there was a lot of focus around what's considered soft skills. So communication, decision making, emotional regulation, teamwork. And I think that those things tend to be more appealing to women than just focusing on, knot tying, belaying, ice axe, summit driven. And you need all of those things in order to have a safe and effective expedition. But I think that things have shifted and, the pace and the accessibility and the approach to climbing mountains has really changed a lot from early explorers. And so, you can get to the summit and back home without having some more of those softer skills. And so I think there was a loss of that space and we're just now remembering it. And there's now more space to be able to have those conversations and to have more communication, which, yeah, I find those to be more essence of the feminine way. And they're coming back around and they are important. I think that like culturally, younger generations are coming forward with a lot more language and conversation around inclusion and diversity and why does it matter? I think we're acknowledging that more.
Yeah, as I talk to women who are new to mountaineering, I think part of the equation is that women very often start hiking, right? And they get comfortable with that and they become curious and they want to push themselves, but it feels very intimidating to join a trip to Mount Baker because they feel like they need to perform, they need to not be the weakest link. There's all this added pressure that and I think we as women generally put on ourselves in those kind of intense mixed gender environments. And so, because now there are more spaces that are specifically focused to women, I think they're becoming more comfortable and more confident entering something challenging like mountaineering. And I think the more guide companies like CTSS can be considerate of those unique circumstances or needs of women, the more we will continue to show up and to be comfortable and to, build our skills and confidence.
That's a wonderful discussion. So two things are coming out of this that I'm at least hearing. The values are shifting where people are identifying that being mindful, being thoughtful, being good at these soft skills, like Kat said, are a value, are an asset in the mountain. And then kind of what Lisa said, women are starting to see themselves in these spaces now, where in the past we maybe just saw ourselves as hikers. We just dabble in the outdoors a little bit here and there. Look, there's a nature walk to do, but we're starting to see ourselves in these spaces. And then the values are on top of that. So these all women's trips help allow all of us to see ourselves. But then as companies continue to articulate their values, you can see that, oh, it's really important who you are and what you bring to the table beyond just can you tie a knot, but can you come with the right mindset, the teamwork, all that good stuff? And those are really important things to us that climb in the Seven Summits, both of those aspects. And I think it really hits on so much of what women feel in the big mountains. So folks, we're going to switch away from the inspiration and kind of painting this picture of the landscape of women in the big mountains. We're going to get into the real resources now, the details on training and nutrition gear. So here's where it gets real fun. All righty. So Lisa, you're on tap.
Yeah.
Naturally for training, which we love. Folks, I'm going to add in really quickly that QR code down below there, that's going to scan directly to our YouTube page, to the webinar that Lisa hosted, which is incredible. A full format webinar all on training with the big mountains, not specifically for women. Lisa's going to speak about it for women right now, but you'll see some QR codes popping up, and that's what it is. All righty, Lisa, go right ahead.
All good. I could, of course, talk about this all day, and I feel very fortunate that I get to as part of my job. So today we'll just talk about a few key considerations, and then if you want to chat more, my contact information will be available at the end of the slide deck, and please feel free to reach out because I'm happy to just answer specific questions or share more about what I've learned with you. Training to me is about preparation, and there are a lot of other pieces to preparation. We'll talk about some more of those today in terms of mindset and gear. I think it's important to note that preparation for the mountains doesn't mean just crushing it in the gym or like randomly going to the gym and working out. It really means having a dedicated program to get you from where you are now to where you need to be for your mountain goal. And to me, it's about preparing not just physically, but also mentally and tactically for whatever you are expecting to experience on the mountain that you're preparing to climb. As women, I feel like we have this superpower of our cycle that we can use to our advantage as we're training and as we're lifting weights and running and hiking. So tracking where you are hormonally can totally maximize your strength phases, and it can help you be more intentional also around recovery. So for example, for women that I coach who want to sync their training with their cycle, we make their recovery week the week that they have their period. So just being more mindful about where you are hormonally and tying your training to that can be a huge asset that we have as women. Many people on this call have probably heard Dr. Stacy Sims, who says women are not small men. We need to train as women and climb as women. not just as small men. And that to me means being smarter about our biology. Regardless, though, of whether you're training according to your cycle, I think the best starting point, if you're getting ready to climb Kilimanjaro or the volcanoes in Ecuador, is to understand first the demands of that mountain. So, what are you expecting to have to be able to do physically and mentally? And really studying that and knowing that training for Denali, where you have to pull a sled and carry a heavy backpack, is very different than training for Everest. And that's different than training for Rainier. So get to know your mountain as a starting point and then assess where you currently are in terms of your fitness, but also your climbing skills. And then what I do as a coach and what you can do even on your own is work backwards from that goal to where you are today and develop this periodized plan, or I like to think of it as a ladder to get from where you are to where you need to be. As a coach, I am a huge fan of functional movement. I think that the best gym is outside. And so things like hill repeats, like long hikes with a weighted backpack really should be prioritized. I hear from so many mountain athletes that I don't want to work out in the gym. And I don't think it should be totally eliminated because it can make you stronger on your mountain days. But I'm always a fan, if you have access to being outside, because hiking, stairs, hill repeats, those things mimic how your body will move on the mountain so much more than a treadmill ever will. So that said, though, I know that most of us around the world are actually elevation challenged. So stairs or treadmill will work. But if you can get on a trail, please do that. You'll gain so much more in terms of not just being ready physically, but testing your gear, working small stabilizer muscles, so much more than you will on a machine. My intention, I think it's important to simulate in your training environment as much as you can what it will be like on the mountain. So that means wearing the actual boots and the actual backpack that you'll wear. It means practicing layers, which sometimes means you need to go out in not ideal weather in order to get that experience. If I'm coaching someone for Everest, I'll have them climb at night. I'll have them wear wet gear sometimes. So anything that you can do to really simulate what you think you'll experience on the mountain will put you in a better position to be ready if that thing actually happens. I think the overarching theme there is to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I've seen many women, are new to mountaineering and want everything to be comfortable, like their layers, their gloves, their, everything. And it's just not reality. There's, of course, times when we can adjust and eat and make sure that we're doing what we can to take care of ourselves. But I think the biggest advice is to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That's what the mountains require of all of us. And then I'll also say not to skimp on recovery. This is something that I often have to negotiate with the clients that I work with. So recovery is actually where you get stronger. Training is stress to our body, and taking a break from that stress and letting our bodies rebuild is how we get stronger. And so working in stretching, mobility, sleep, my favorite mode of recovery. Those things are all just as important as actually lifting the weight or going on the run or doing the hike, because that's when you recover and get stronger. I'll close with, this isn't just about building fitness. There's so much more to being successful and confident in the mountains. It's about fitness, yes, but the more you can replicate in terms of mindset and testing gear in your preparation, the better off you'll be mentally and physically when you get there.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. I do have a couple of questions that came in that I'd love to ask. Hey, what would you advise for an 8,000 meter peak? What would you advise for a 7,000 meter peak? What would you advise for climbing Kilimanjaro, 5,000 meters? Now I'm adding to it. Maybe they're doing a 14 or even about 4,500 meters. Does the baseline of a training plan look remarkably different at these various peaks?
Structure of the plan really, from my view, looks the same. We're going to first build a baseline of fitness. So that looks like, general strength, improving your cardiovascular capacity. Then we're going to make sure that as you build additional strength, it's specific to the mountain. So if you're climbing Denali, We're going to build a whole lot of strength because that's what's needed to carry those loads, as Kat can attest. We're also going to pull a sled or pull a tire because you'll have to be doing that on Denali. If you're preparing to climb Rainier, you're going to be carrying a 45-pound backpack eventually and going uphill or being on a treadmill with that. If you're going to Ecuador, your backpack is not going to be as heavy, so there isn't that big strength component. So that middle phase of training is going to look different depending on what your mountain goal is. And then the last phase that I focus on is all about building endurance, and that really looks very similarly regardless of what your mountain is. So the structure is the same. I'd say it's the strength component that varies the most mountain to mountain.
Awesome. Those were really great examples, Lisa. Thank you for that. And remember, when you sign up for an expedition with somebody like us, we're going to give you a specific plan for Denali to make sure you haul that sled and you're ready for that experience. And so that does come at you. And then on our YouTube, you'll also see that we've done a number of expedition or mountain specific webinars. So we've chatted with Mike Hamill, our owner, about Kilimanjaro. We've done Aconcagua, things like that. So you can go in straight to the training section in that webinar and hear what we were talking about specific to that mountain. And then one other question came in about acclimatization. We don't have a slide on acclimatization. I did put in some resources, our webinar on acclimatization and breathwork. But Lisa, thinking about training for high altitude, training for acclimatization, is that something you have to factor in? Should you be altitude training at home?
It's a big debate for sure because we have access to hypoxic generators that allow us to sleep and even train in a hypoxic environment. I've used them. I have one. I've coached many people who've used them. I think they're beneficial, but I don't think they're necessary. Faye Fuller for sure didn't have a hypoxico before she went up to the top of Mount Rainier. Well, I think people get very sort of caught up in like, I have to use this hypoxic thing, but also pay attention to your acclimatization schedule. So it has been built in order to allow us to naturally acclimatize without something like a hypoxic generator. So do I think it is helpful? Yes. It does not perfectly simulate, of course, being at elevation because it can't simulate the difference in pressure that occurs as we climb higher. I think it can help people get to, say, base camp on Everest in a much healthier state because your body is not having to use resources in order to acclimatize because that's already, for the most part, been done for you. I work with a lot of people also that want to spend time in Colorado or New Mexico before their climb. If you have the time and resources to do that, I think it's great. But again, I don't think it's necessary. I think people have been safely summiting and returning for decades without that kind of added acclimatization.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for that. Just as a note, kind of reiterating what Lisa said, we absolutely love Hypoxico. We love working with them. They're one of our partners. They joined us on that acclimatization webinar. But as a baseline, all of our regular expeditions, like Lisa said, our acclimatization schedules are generous. We allow for anyone coming from wherever in Florida, wherever in California, to acclimatize properly given our schedule. Unless you're doing a speed ascent, of course, and then we would actually partner you specifically with Hypoxico for that speed ascent as that's part of the preparation for your program itself. So it is a great conversation to have with your expedition company about how does their acclimatization schedule work? Is this something I should even do or consider? Because they're going to give you their honest opinion and thoughts about how their schedule looks and whether they feel like that would be beneficial. It is absolutely such a good resource, but I think it's a good one to be mindful and thoughtful about if that's something that you want to take on. But again, not always needed because we do definitely allow for enough time for that to happen naturally. Awesome. So Lisa, I think you're continuing on because we got you on training and then we're skipping you right over to nutrition right here.
I think this is one of the most underrated performance tools in the mountains, which is nutrition. What and when you eat on a climb can be the difference between bonking and feeling really good when you stand on the summit. As a coach, I'm always surprised by the number of people who either don't eat at all when they're out on a long excursion, or they're not mindful of how they should be eating and how they should be fueling. And to me, I often joke the only reason I'm a mountaineer is because of the snacks. Like this is a big part of why I enjoy being in the mountains. So what, and another guideline is to like, you don't wait to fill your car up with gas until it's empty. Our bodies are the same way. We need to be eating frequently, especially for big, hard efforts. If I'm having a long day out, I will plan to eat every hour about 300 calories and about 30 grams of carbohydrates. And it's those carbs that are going to give you quick energy that you need to keep moving hour after hour on the mountains. Also, know that altitude can dampen your appetite. And so, in addition to staying ahead of your hunger, I encourage athletes that I work with to think of food as fuel, which is often a shift that has to happen. Like, as we're sitting here today, we get to decide what we want to have for lunch, we get to decide what time we want to eat lunch. And in the mountains, that's not how we should think about food. It's about fuel that your body needs in order to perform and do what you're asking it to do. I also am a huge fan of testing all of your snacks before you climb and to bring food with you that you actually are excited and want to eat. Something that sounds great to you at sea level might not sound yummy at 17,000 feet. So test it as much as you can in similar environments. Our bodies need a range of macronutrients. So we need carbs, as I said, for quick energy. Fat will be a longer burning fuel source for us. And protein is what you want to focus on for recovery. Pay attention also to what you're craving. If you're always craving something salty, that could mean that you need more electrolytes, either in what you're drinking or in what you're eating. And that takes me to hydration, which is another, I am so surprised at how much of an impact hydration has on our performance. I was doing some research recently, and there's studies that say that even mild dehydration, so 3 to 5% loss of hydration, can affect your strength, it can affect your speed, it can affect your reaction time, it will increase your core temperature and put you at a higher risk of some sort of heat-related illness, it can also impair your judgment. So please hydrate. And as we were talking about, it's not possible to take 5 liters with you if you're climbing because that's just super heavy. So there's some tricks that you could do to hydrate ahead of time. You should always be using electrolytes. Work out your hydration system, whether that's a bladder, whether it's bottles. I'm a fan of a bladder even in cold environments. I think there's ways to use that as long as you have a backup source for hydration. If you're wearing a down suit, I think putting the squeezy bottles that come with your running vest in chest pockets of your down suit is a great way to stay hydrated. So just like snacks and food, work all that out ahead of time, test it, know what electrolytes you like, know what your system is going to be, and make sure you've got it super dialed before your climb. Another thing to practice is eating on the move. So some people really have GI distress if they eat while they're exercising. And being able to do that in the mountains is a game changer because you can have little snacks with you as you're moving. And sometimes we can't safely take a break depending on the weather or conditions. And so being able to do that and to get just a few calories in makes a big difference. My go-to in this circumstance is chocolate covered espresso beans because they're the right mix of caffeine to keep me awake. They taste good. I love the chocolate and the sugar. So I've also cut up a Snickers bar into tiny little chunks and just put it in the pocket of my backpack or my down suit. So figuring out those systems so that you can always have a constant source of calories and of hydration makes a huge difference. So those are a couple of tips and tricks that I've used and seen. But Kat, I bet you've seen good and bad fueling and hydration scenarios. Are there any that sort of stick out to you that are worth sharing?
You're like, oh, you've seen the good and the bad. It's yeah, I've done the good and the bad. And it's been so much of a learning discovery process. And I've totally not gotten to summits and had to retreat because of my nutrition and because of fitness too. I think what you spoke to earlier, I want to talk about that too, of training and just training for being uncomfortable. I highly recommend going out and going on jogs in the rain where you're cold and seeing what it's like to have your hands get cold. If you're coming to the PNW and you're climbing in the Cascades, high likelihood. I think actually you just got back from a pretty wet time on Mount Adams.
My tent is still wet. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so just like, practice these things in places where the stakes are lower and you know what it's like. You know how to like get those gloves under your armpits to start drying them out. You know where you can like expand your limits and really where you're at. So that was really, really good. I love the constant grazing. I love the pouches that they make right here. So I can just, like munch, munch, munch. And
Yep.
I'm a nighttime muncher too. I find that I tend to get cold at night. And so just being able to keep my fire fueled has been really helpful for me. Yeah, there's so many good tips and tricks in there.
We can agree it's all about the snacks.
Yeah, definitely. Which, with that being said, I did just get back from the dentist the other day, and it is very important to continue brushing and flossing with all of this this snacking. Otherwise, you might get a pretty big bill at your dentist.
Sure.
So you got a great question. Eating for recovery. Any tips or tricks to help you recover after a hard training session, or like Kat said, while you're in bed, sleeping, resting for the evening?
So recovery is where you want to really prioritize eating protein. If I'm doing a gym session, or even if I'm going like on my drive to go for a hike or a run, I will usually have half a protein shake that has a banana and some peanut butter, so some sugar in it and some carbohydrates. I'll eat half of that on the way there, and then I'll drink half of it on the way back. And then when I get home, I will focus on having like a salad with a lot of protein in it, or just a chicken breast. And if that's not available, having another protein shake that's got like 25 grams of protein in it is another good way to make sure that you're recovering. I like to think about my recovery as the beginning of my next workout, because it's really easy to like not recover, right? I just did the hard thing. I checked the box. I'm going to go shower and take a nap and move on with my day. But if you skip that recovery, it's going to make your next workout the next day even tougher. So think of that recovery as just the beginning of the workout that's to follow the next day, and focus on protein. There have been studies that say you need to have that protein on board within an hour. So I try to do it within like 30 or 45 minutes to make sure that I'm giving my muscles what they need to rebuild and be stronger and ready for whatever the next day will bring. Good question. I love that people are talking about recovery. It's so important.
Yeah, same. Kat, there's one follow-up question to your suggestion. I know you said you graze at night too while you're sleeping. Somebody, and my little light bulb went off. I live near the Grand Canyon, so sleeping with snacks in your tent is terrifying. So
now let me be more specific about that.
Jump in there.
So that means it's like actually on my body. So it doesn't end up being things that can get gooey and messy in my sleeping bag. Because yeah, depending where you are, and if you're like up in the mountains, having little critters and stuff coming around is less likely. But when you are camping and you're on expedition, and you're around places where rodents or birds or really anything are coming out, you want to make sure that you're not having your snacks just like sprawled around. Like, I'm not talking about like Pringle cans open, that sort of thing. Like, it's pretty concise. I tend to have the little snack size Ziploc bag, and it's in a pocket that I know exactly where it is inside my sleeping bag. And so I'm not having to deal with like wrappers or anything like that. So it's contained. And yeah, my little pack, it ends up being nuts, and I guess there are some like chocolate covered M&Ms in there, and then some gummies just to have there. But I tend to just be like more on the like protein, and then a little bit of sugar because I like the sugar. Does that answer that question of like how to keep it contained and not be worrying about having mice nibble through your tent and then run across your face? Because that's never happened to me.
That was my first thought. I'm assuming as you go up in elevation, you're on glaciers and stuff, that the critters just get less and less. You're not seeing quite as many, but I've seen some really vivacious marmots, at least in Colorado, and the pine martens are quite ferocious as well. So you'd be thoughtful of that.
Yeah. And birds. Ravens and crows are like very intelligent, and they know how to open zippers. So, those snacks are staying on you. So you can fight for them.
Makes sense. All righty. So, Kat, you're going to be jumping in here. Folks, we are going to go ahead and switch gears. We're jumping into gear now. I do want to give a little shout out. This picture right here is Emma Sherwin. She was also on our Everest team this year, and she became the youngest American woman to summit the 7 summits and summit Everest. She's an absolute badass. I'll just say it. She kicks ass. She's awesome. And we were honored to have her on our team. and be climbing with her through the course of her entire 7 summits. So I just had to give a little nod to Emma right there because we've all been super excited about it. Kat, you're talking gear. Love it. Let's go.
Oh, yeah. We chose that photo specifically because she is rocking a beautiful kit and has a fair amount of gear that I think is very recommendable. So, yes, just to reiterate, fitness, nutrition are your foundation, and there is no amount of expensive gear or skills or techniques that will get you to the summit and back in good style if those are not your foundation. It's like so similar to if you're going to build your house on a sandy or marshland, that's going to crumble. So you really need to make sure that foundation's there. But that said, having gear that's appropriate for your objective and for your conditions and for you can really make a successful summit happen. Historically, most technical gear, climbing gear and clothing has been made by men for men. So women have been at a disadvantage, but things are really changing. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier in my intro that I have done a lot of gear testing over the years for different companies like Patagonia, Outdoor Research, Mountain Hardwear. And they're really doing a great job of wanting to adapt and wanting to support female climbers that have different needs and different body types. So this is a broad sense of just being able to give you more information so you can make better educated decisions once you are going to try to buy your gear. It starts again, I think Lisa brought this up, is like, what is the objective that you are looking at? So get really clear about what you're training for and what you're preparing for. So whether it's Baker or Mount Vincent or Mount Everest, those are all going to require slightly different kits for your expedition. With CTSS, wow, I'm so grateful to be a part of this community. They have such a great gear list that is so thorough and so in-depth for every specific trip. So I really highly recommend that once you decide to sign up or once you decide to get into a specific objective, that you start looking at that, because then you can bring that into your fitness training as well. Those gear lists are essentially like a Guide's Choice Award.
Brooke and Danny put them together. They're our program managers. They do such a bang up job with them. I love them. They're so detailed and they're like, this product is great. And here's 7 things that you should look for if you go and buy a different product, which is fine too.
So yes, in general, know your gear, practice, try it out. Even if the conditions aren't right, or if, you're on Lisa's training plan and you're doing it like down the street wearing your boots and looking funny like that, it is so important to get familiar with your gear. You'll then, in that point, be able to find your corks and discover if there's a zipper that has a really tiny pull tab that you're somehow meant to pull open with big gloves on. And you'll be able to figure out each component of your kit and see if it works together as a seamless system or if it doesn't and you need to modify it. And you'll have the opportunity to fine tune it before you're out actually trying to send. There's also a lot of research that supports the look good, feel good theory. And I kind of take that the next step further, that if you feel good, you'll perform well and you'll have a bigger capacity to focus. And so it's different than being able to be uncomfortable. What I'm saying here is that if something doesn't fit well, don't buy it. And there are a lot of options out there now. Let's just kind of start going down this list of some basic things to look for when you're purchasing your kits. So top and bottom layering system. It should be breathable, fast drying, easy to adjust, and not too tight. I really like merino wool. I think that it does a really good job of not having that plasticky feel, and it breathes really well. And when you're wearing it for weeks on end without washing it, it doesn't smell as much, and it really supports my morale and ability to feel good. Additionally, in your layering, which I think I saw this in one of the questions, how do you layer at 7,000 meters? I have found that having a couple of layers that have 3/4 zips are really nice for my base layers, because you're going to be putting on big puffy jackets. And if you need to do those micro adjustments, being able to just go to that bottom layer and just let out a breath is really helpful there. I would also say that just having a lot of different layers and options to choose from, because it's never a one and done thing. It's a system that works together that you can fine tune and adjust for the specific conditions that you're experiencing. Also, I just want to acknowledge different cycles, different times in our life. as women start entering into like perimenopause, temperature regulation can get more difficult and you can have much more extremes. And so having layers that you can take on or off easily and adjust with zippers, either the half zip or 3/4 zip, I think have been really helpful for that. I also want to speak to bras. And so, getting the support that you need is definitely really important. I have found that in mountaineering, I'm not necessarily doing these really high impact exercises where I need, high support for my breasts. It's more kind of like medium. And one thing that I don't think has ever been talked to me about, and to me in this context or in this community, is that wearing too tight of bras can really impact your lymphatic system and it can restrict your blood flow around your breasts and around your armpits. And then restricting that blood flow can also impact your ability to stay warm and regulate your heat. So one thing that I really recommend is that you get bras that you know that you can take off easily. I really like the strap behind so that even if I'm in conditions where like being able to take it off over my head isn't possible, I can at the very least like give myself some breathing room. I've also found too bras that have a racer back that you can just clip and have it in a racer back mode or just straight on is really helpful. And it's helpful too when I'm wearing big packs. I can adjust where those straps are cutting into me over time. So having adjustability there. Let's move on to packs. So one thing that I think is really good to discern and to understand is how to determine your torso length. So if you just go ahead and tilt your head down, and then at the base of your neck, you'll have that nice big bony landmark. That's your C7. So that's the top of where your measurement for your torso goes. And then we're going to look for and we're going to find where exactly our shelf for a pelvic girdle is. So if you go to, I'll pull this down just a little bit. If you take your hands and have them on your ribs and then drop them down, the next big, I don't know if you can see me, I'll try to step back. Got your hands on your ribs, you drop them down. The next bony landmark that you're going to find is your iliac crest. If you let your hands wrap around to your back, that's where your shelf is. And I just want to show that my sacrum is actually down here. So that's a really big difference. So from the top at the C7 down to your shelf of your pelvic girdle is where you're actually measuring. And that's what determines if you're extra small, if you're small, medium, or large. And that doesn't determine, it's different than your pack volume or capacity. So even if you're like an extra small or small, you can still get packs that are, 45 or 60 liters or whatever liter pack is appropriate for your objective. A lot of times these days we're shopping online. And so I do recommend, if you can, going into stores that are specific for mountaineering to be able to have someone help you and measure it. But knowing the difference, I think is also really helpful because it's empowering. You'll know more. And if you are purchasing online, it will make your life a little bit easier. Additional things for backpack is having adjustable straps, which most backpacks do. The one that I think is most important for me as a female is having, so you have your shoulder straps and then your chest strap that goes across the top. For me, being able to adjust those chest straps up and down is really important because as I'm carrying loads for long periods of time on expeditions, like particularly on Denali, I'm going to be shifting where my weight is. And this is very relevant to Mount Baker too. We're going to shift sometimes and have most of our weight on our hips, or we might be pulling it up onto our shoulders. And being able to adjust that up a little bit so that it's actually sitting below my collarbone, as opposed to, moving slightly down and being on my breast, that can be really uncomfortable and restrict my ability to take big breaths. And so that's another thing that I'm looking for when I'm thinking about purchasing packs. I loved how Stephanie already introduced Emma. Yeah, I was up at Mount Everest Base Camp and got to meet her, and she is so cool. She's also 4'11". I didn't ask her how much she weighs, but I think that photo is pretty clear. She packs a lot of power in that frame. And in this photo, her backpack next to her, it's a hyperlight pack. And those packs are really great for objectives like Everest. They're light, they have a lot of capacity for inside, they're easy to move them, and they have minimal bulk. But you can look up other photos of Emma when she was climbing Denali, And she has this backpack that's up over her head. And it is not that same minimalist backpack. She's using, I believe it's a Gregory or Osprey. And those two companies, they have a lot of really great options that are women specific, and they have a lot more padding that are better for carrying those heavy loads. So again, what does your itinerary look like? Denali versus Everest, they're going to have very different needs for your backpack. Lyra, she is a mountain guide as well, and she has a really great blog post with the Outdoor Gear Lab that goes through different backpacks for mountaineerings and different packs as well. I think that climbing the 7 summits for each specific climb has a really great track record too. So there's another option just for more basic general mountaineering and being able to go out and purchase a pack for the trail. Gloves. This is where you're going to have a nice big quiver of different gloves. So generally you have a liner, a lightweight or midweight glove, which tends to be like a leather glove with a fleece lining, and you then waterproof them. And then there's the heavyweight glove. I like to call my heavyweight glove my working glove. And this, for especially those big mountains, those 8,000 meter peaks, this tends to be the glove that you're wearing most of the time and you're using on fixed lines. And I know that that was a question that someone had asked earlier on too, like what's your main fixed line working glove on big peaks? So working glove. And then the last one is your over mitts, which your over mitts are your oh shit mitts. Generally, unless you're going for like this summit at the top and it's really cold, you might bust them out for a brief window. But generally, these are mitts that end up staying in your backpack. So big quiver, those are 4 types of gloves. But honestly, I never just bring 4 gloves on any expedition with me, whether it's a 4-day or a 21-day trip. I'm bringing more like 6 to 7 gloves so that I have variety and options to be able to have exactly what I want and options for if things get wet. So keeping your hands warm and dry and planning your system to give you adequate dexterity and sensitivity can not only save your hands, but also your life. So it's really important. Unfortunately, Raynaud's syndrome is actually significantly more common in women than men. I was trying to get a good number for that, but it's somewhere around like 80% more likely for women. And I think it might be associated with estrogen levels that contribute to that. So one other consideration I'd like to share for that, for people who also just might struggle with having cold hands, whether you're diagnosed or not, is 3-fingered gloves. So it's kind of like the in-between of a mitt and a glove. Black Diamond has a really good glove. I don't remember the exact name now, but it still gives you that dexterity so you can be working with your carabiners and doing rope work while still having a little bit more insulation for your fingers to stay warm. Let's see, gosh, yeah, there's so much nitty gritties that you can get into with gloves. I'll just say the gloves that Emma is wearing in the picture, those are the Black Diamond guide gloves. I know that Mike Hamill really loves those gloves. He states that they're like the warmest on the market, and I have to agree as well. What I'll say about those gloves is that I find that each little finger tends to be pretty small. So if you have small fingers, that might be your glove, and it might just feel nice and peachy as soon as you put them on. For most people, it's really important to wear them and break them in because they are pretty stiff. Let's move on to harnesses now. So some of the key things with harnesses, especially having considerations of being a woman, is making sure that they have a drop seat. So that means having the ability to undo the back of the harness leg loops, be able to do that easy. So on your harness, when you reach around in the back, there's 2 little straps that hold up the leg loops. They don't hold any load, but they're there to just keep the leg loops up. So having the ability to open them up will give you a lot more flexibility to drop your pants without having to come unclipped from your harness, which when you're on glaciers, when you're in steep terrain, you really want to be able to keep your safety. Weigh My Rack has a really cool write-up about different harnesses, and they go in depth about buckles and clips and hooks. And there's pros to cons to all of them. And I found that that blog does a good job of going over those. Emma here is wearing the Petzl Altitude harness, which I also have, and it is very popular. I didn't take a look at her harness, but for me, I was able to adjust it, and I added a carabiner to the back because it's not a true drop seat as you purchase it off the market. For people with smaller waists, I would recommend the brand Blue Ice as an alpine harness. They tend to run small. For Petzl, I tend to be a small medium, but then for Blue Ice, I actually tend to be like more of a large. So they tend to run on the smaller side. And then considerations for people with larger bodies, I would really look for adjustable leg loops. So those are the adjustable clips. There's two little D-ring clips that tend to adjust open. Not every harness has that adjustability. And so if you're a person that has a bigger body, I have found and seen that being able to adjust them to your specific thigh size is really nice. And in addition to that, having waistbands that are a little bit wider is really helpful for being able to distribute body weight over a larger surface area. Arc'teryx has some really nice harnesses for that. Let's move on to boots. So, considerations for women, I think that there's a lot more likelihood of needing to have smaller boots than larger ones. The market does pretty well about meeting the needs for larger size boots for larger size men because that has been the trend. But I was actually trying to find out, like, what if you have a size 5 US women's foot? Like, what do you do? And so I reached out to La Sportiva and Scarpa about 2 weeks ago, and I just heard back this morning from La Sportiva. And so they said that they are now able to have, if you order from Italy, a size 37 European, which is a US size 6.5. So I'm like, okay. And that also makes sense. So when you're mountaineering, your feet and your whole body swells as you go up to altitude. I wish I could have included it, but it's probably for the better. I have some really lovely photos of myself, and I kind of look like Shrek when I'm up there. I see Lisa laughing because I imagine you kind of know what I'm talking about too. Your whole body swells, and your feet do in particular. So with your mountaineering boots, you should size up 1 to 2 sizes to accommodate that swelling. Socks are also a really ideal way of making small adjustments to the volume and the fit of your boot. So if you run on the smaller size and you're getting towards the end of what's available locally for your mountaineering boots, being able to have 2 pairs of socks, a liner, and then a thicker outer sock, you can have that fine tunement of getting a fatter one or smaller one to make those adjustments for the swelling. So I always on expedition like to bring different thicknesses of socks while I'm going out. Using foot inserts too and shoe inserts is a great way to be able to kind of bulk up your boot so that your shoe and your foot can fit inside the boots, even if it might be kind of on the larger volume scale. I like to bring 2 different foot inserts if I know that I'm going up to elevation and I'm working with a boot that I've only been able to train and break in for 1 to 2 climbs, because my foot is going to swell differently. The boot is going to feel differently. And so if you're starting off at lower elevations and you're feeling like you have a lot of space in your boot, put in an insert and put in a thicker sock so that you can take up that and you're not as likely to get as much rub. And then as you move up in elevation, when you're sleeping up at like your camp 3 or camp 4, you'll be able to downsize for that. So going back around to the La Sportiva boot, if you have a foot size that's smaller than 5, I'm not quite sure. I don't know if I have all of the answers there. I didn't have a chance to talk with Emma about this, but I could believe that she's probably somewhere around there. And then so for her, being able to wear a 37 size boot was really acceptable and can be acceptable. So I'm really curious if there's anyone out there that has smaller feet than, a 35 European or like a US size 5. Danny and Josh also have a really great webinar specific to gear from CTSS. So it's put on the slide right there. You can go ahead and do that. I watched a little bit of it this morning and I was like, oh yeah, in depth. So I'm going to press pause. You saw, I'm like, whoa, there's so much there. I'm like talking about shoes. And it's a really big topic. CTSS has so many great resources out there. You can also sign up and ask for a 60-minute gear consultation with CTSS. And that can be so helpful if you really are wanting to hone in exactly what you need and why you need it. For me, knowing the why significantly helps me make decisions. So recommend that. But I'm just going to talk briefly about the down suits and zippers. So for down suits, there's kind of two main suits that have the option for how you're going to open up your down suit to use the restroom. So there's the half moon or rainbow, they're both called that, or the zip through. And they both have their pros and cons. For the half moon, think about the rainbow or the half moon. They go across your low back like that. And they tend to be really easy for squatting. They're easy to get around layers, but having that open up, now all of a sudden you have this big layer of fabric that you're having to hold back. And so it can really make using pee funnels more challenging, and just trying to keep it out of the way can be a common problem. With the zip through zipper, it kind of does what the half moon or the rainbow isn't as good at, but comes at a cost, and it's now harder to actually access layers deep down if you need to make adjustments, and it can be harder to get the zipper out. If you can see on that slide too, Nara, there's the down suits, and then the next photo next to it is a pair of hiking pants. And that is Nara brand. And they keep on coming up on my Facebook and Instagram feed as you need this, you need this. And they are awesome. They have the zip through, and they make going to the bathroom on the trail and as you're approaching big mountains and any kind of objective a lot easier. The way that I like to think about using this, because when I first saw them, I'm like, well, if I'm wearing underwear, how does this work? And so I don't know if anyone has gotten a one-piece swimsuit and then has gone to the bathroom and then just pulled it to the side. It's the same thing. You're able to pull your underwear to the side and still use that. The modified half moon is the last little column over here. And I think that Stephanie is going to be able to link in Megan's recommendation for adding a handle to that suit. So yeah, there's a lot more options on the market now, but at the end of the day, I have found that no matter what, I'm probably going to modify my suit, and especially my outer layers. As soon as I start putting gloves on, there is no zipper that I've ever received that is big enough for me to have confidence or be excited about pulling without me adding about a 5-inch paracord, putting it through the loop, tying it, and then making it this big old piece of rainbow material there that I can easily see with my gloves and just yank down. Lisa, I'd love to hear from you and what you have experience in this way.
Yeah, it's great to see so many options now for zippers. I think when I started climbing, there just really weren't that many. And so I sort of still rely on what I used to do back then, which is find a seamstress to add the zip through zipper to all my layers. I think this is probably obvious, but whatever your zipper shape is, needs to be the same on all your layers. It gets too complicated if one is zip through and one is rainbow. So plan that they're all the same. And I haven't tried them, but I've heard now that there are underwear that have a flap at the crotch. So instead of pulling it to the side, which works too, there's a flap for access to use your pee funnel also. So it's just so important to see, and good to see, that there are more options for women so that we can better manage what we have to do easily in the mountains. The other thing that I will say is to practice. Get your pee funnel, figure out what kind you like. If you like it rigid or a little softer, practice in the shower, practice in your backyard, practice on a hike. Make sure you just get all the stuff dialed in. There will be mistakes. We've all spilled our pee bottle in our sleeping bag at some point in our lives. So be prepared for that as well. But the more you can practice and get it really dialed, the easier it'll be when it counts.
I do want to give a shout out. Megan Buchanan is the one that helped write the article with us, the blog that we shared. She's one of the 7 Summit finishers who worked with us on all of her climbs, which was really awesome. She was on Everest, 2 years ago? She was on Karstens with us this past year to go ahead and finish out both versions of the 7 Summits, which is really cool. So we were really appreciative that she wanted to share her knowledge. But modifications, ladies, don't stray away from making them. Lisa said she still works with the seamstress to modify it. And then Megan did the same thing. I think she hand sewed it herself, just that little thing. We had to make the diagram just really rudimentary because we had no picture of it. So that's what it looked like there. So,
Yep.
folks, we are totally switching gears out of like the technical side of things. We're going to get into the softer side, which is the mental game, speaking up, and then also the bathroom side of things. So, I guess that's a little bit logistical and technical as well. But here we go with no further ado. And then that's Megan right there on that side looking absolutely like a rock star.
So yeah, mindset is one of my favorite topics. I feel like it's becoming more of a conversation for mountaineers, but historically we've spent so much time talking about gear and routes and logistics, but not always about the mental game. And I think it is certainly above a certain elevation, 20 or 23,000 feet. It is really all that you're relying on because, your fitness has started to degrade if you're on an expedition for multiple weeks. And I really think that when you get super high, it is all about your mental toughness that's getting you to the top and back safely. In my experience, the confidence for most people, I actually had the pleasure of coaching Emma for all of her 7 summits, and she's one person that I will say had the confidence from the very beginning, which is remarkable for a 15-year-old. But for most people, it doesn't show up all at once. It doesn't show up at the beginning of whatever, the second you decide for whatever your goal is. I think it's built little by little over time by practicing and by being really intentional. It also happens when you put yourself in uncertain situations or difficult situations that require you to troubleshoot or to push yourself. It's also important to note that for many of us, being the only woman on a team, sometimes just showing up can feel like a really bold act. So I want to acknowledge that as well. I have been on expeditions where I felt like I had to prove that I deserved to be there. I imagine most of us would say that. And the truth is that for me, very often that pressure was self-inflicted. I was setting these incredibly high standards for myself in this sort of environment where I felt like I couldn't be vulnerable or I couldn't fail. And that's not really helpful to performance. What does help, I think, is being very clear on why you're there and what that climb means to you, and being able to anchor into that when you need to with a mantra or just a reminder or a mental image of something. That why and being able to really hold on to that when things get difficult makes a huge difference for many people. It's also key, I think, to trust your instinct. As women, I think we tend to have stronger insights and instincts than a lot of people. And so trusting that and having the confidence to own your voice and show up for your teammates with presence and honesty, I think makes a huge difference. That's for me the starting point. When I work with athletes, knowing why you're there is where we start with mindset work. We also spend a lot of time talking about fear. For me, this was a huge shift when I was able to reframe fear from being a weakness and something that should be avoided at all costs to just information that my brain is giving me. I started to think of it like it's a signal, just like I'm hungry or just like I'm cold, and acknowledging that fear and being curious about why it's showing up is what has allowed me to continue moving forward in the mountains, even when things were difficult or a little bit scary. Of course, there's times when there's objective hazard and fear is totally necessary and appropriate to keep us safe. But I think very often that fear is trying to keep us from growing. And so being able to acknowledge it and move forward with it is what has allowed me to keep moving and to have these sort of techniques and tools that are helpful for me in the mountains when things get difficult. In addition to mantras and that reframing and knowing my why, breathing is such a huge tool for me to just calm myself down and regulate my nervous system when things get difficult. To me, I think of my breath as always with me, always. And it's this tool that I can employ and breathe, have really long exhales to just keep my nervous system back on track when things get stressful. I will also rely on mantras. So I have a couple that are really special to me that I say all the time when things get difficult that help me to just reframe and refocus and stop this like negative mental narrative that's going on in my brain. So practice these things, start to explore some of these tools, and just like gear and just like snacks, practice them when you're training, practice them on a long run or a difficult hike so that when the time comes on your big climb, you've already got this toolbox of things that you can just grab from in order to help you stay strong mentally and in the right mindset as you're climbing. This really, to me, is a journey of confidence. And I think that by sharing these things, we start to build it and move through it more strongly together.
I think one that you spoke to about breath work, the mantra that I came up with was lead with the lungs, follow with the feet. It's such a quick little reminder. And I've had some of my clients actually share it forward. I hear them talking, when other teammates are like really struggling and stuff, like, hey, yeah, where are you at in your breath? Lead with your lungs, follow with your feet. Well, the one that I think comes up for me most as a mantra is a really uplifting one. And it's I'm a ninja, I'm a cat, I'm an alpine ninja cat. It's just over and over in my head. And I adapted that from Marc Andre, who wrote an article about his climbings on one of my favorite mountains, Mount Slessy. But it's just, yeah, it's fun. It's upbeat. It makes me feel more agile, and it really helps get me into the mindset that I need to like keep moving forward. And it's definitely not appropriate at all times, but when I'm like in the slog, it's a good lift me up.
I love that. I'm going to remember that. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really cute. Awesome. Kat, I think you're going to continue that kind of mantra mindset and speak a little bit from the perspective of mindset, but how we can work with our guides and our team to really make sure that our mindset stays attuned and on point.
Yeah. So as a guide, this is coming to help share what helps me help you. And so speaking up early and often, that encompasses so much of it. I know that especially when you've been through your training, when you've been really pushing, you've set this goal and now you're on the expedition, there's so much at stake that it can be really easy to brush off a hot spot or a headache. And in the mountains, having these little things come up as yellow flags, if they go unacknowledged or unresolved, they can really snowball, and it can come up and can potentially put you in more vulnerable positions further along in the expedition. And for me, as a guide, I would rather have you say, hey, yeah, I have a hot spot, like it's coming up, or like, yeah, I have a little bit of a headache. And I won't take that as seeing you as like having weakness or not being ready or like, anything that might come up with feeling less than. For me, it's information. It means that we can address it and we can keep on moving forward. And I'm not worried, because if I have to come towards each person and ask those questions, that's taking a lot more from me. Establishing rapport with your guide is really what I think I'm speaking to there. And it goes and it makes not just like individual success, but team success. And I think being able to speak to those kind of things early on, it helps to create a space where people feel safe and they feel like they can bring up things that they're experiencing or feeling. Just keeping open lines of communication that are direct and frequent is really important for me. So having just little check-ins here and there so that like we're keeping tabs on each other is really helpful. And it really helps me build trust. We're building trust early on in an expedition. Later on, when things are, getting more exciting, pushing boundaries, I know that I can quickly check in with you and then we can keep on moving forward. And that assessment for me, the time it takes, can make the difference between continuing to go up or needing to make the decision to go down. Another thing that I really want to encourage individuals to do is to ask for feedback, especially if you're not getting it. I know that CTSS has a lot of really exceptional guides that are tuning in, really do care and want to know. But like we're all showing up with different capacities, with different backgrounds, or just having a bad day too, right? Like not being able to be at full capacity to give to others. So you might have to prompt your guide to ask for it. So it might sound like, hey, what did you notice I could focus on or improve on with my cramponing technique? Or how was my pace today? Like, would that be appropriate for a summit pace? And by asking these types of questions, to me, you're helping me know that you have self-awareness and that you're checking in. If it feels like you're closed off and it's hard to receive feedback, it's going to be a lot harder for me to know like where your limits are. So just building up that communication is so, so important. I also really want to encourage people as you're showing up to these courses to have confidence in knowing yourself. I know that you're going out and going into new environments, going out of your comfort zone, but knowing who you are and where your limits are and where you've been before is really helpful. And it's really helpful to speak to that. I'm really curious, and someone had mentioned, like, if you have kids, there's a lot more barriers and a lot of more logistics that you need to make in order to be able to get to the mountains. And I also just want to say to any mamas out there, you have so much to offer, especially in the mountains. You have endurance, you have patience, you know how to deal with conflict. You know what it's like to be tired and to keep going. And I want mamas on my trips. I want people to know what it's like to take care of others when they're at their limit. That is such good experience for pushing yourself individually in the mountains. Yeah. And then continuing on, just being kind and curious to others. It's really so good. If you're feeling uncomfortable, if you're seeing someone getting pushed, to approach the whole process with kindness and curiosity. And like Lisa was saying, like, why is this coming up? Like, why am I having this fear of being cold? And I think approaching it from a way of being curious can really change the conversation when things are getting uncomfortable.
I will add that very often in group dynamics, multiple people are thinking the same thing. Maybe we're shy about saying something, but very often when you bring up a question or point something out, there are other people who are thinking the same thing. And you create this space where it's okay to say something that might be a little awkward or difficult. And then that just encourages other people to do the same thing. So one of our strongest assets is our voice, and we're doing ourselves and the other women around us a disservice when we don't use it with confidence.
And I think of speaking up, early and often, it's a little bit easier for us to say, oh, I have a hot spot perhaps, or I have a headache. But our next couple of slides are going to be like about UTIs, about your period, about being in menopause, things like that. And those are things that are going to feel harder to speak up early and often about. And so I think that we have to be really mindful that it's all of us, our holistic body and our holistic mindset and how we're feeling. And we shouldn't kind of mute ourselves because it might make a male on our team uncomfy. That's okay if you're on your period and you need to talk about it. That's going to be okay.
Yeah. All right. Bathroom logistics. So I want to acknowledge that social anxiety with bathrooming is real and that it is really helpful to start working on it ahead of expeditions if that's something you experience. And like everything else, I recommend practicing when you're at home. Start going to the bathroom with your door open. Or if you have a backyard, maybe start trying to use the restroom in the backyard and just getting more comfortable not having full privacy or doors to close yourself behind. When I need to go to the bathroom on a rope team, just really any kind of bathroom, and I'm attached to a rope to someone, I like to just call courtesy turn. And for me, being able to say it in that way, it's like once I say it, everyone knows what that means. And it keeps it light. For me, that doesn't make me feel quite as like vulnerable. It puts me in a place of lightheartedness and also in control. And yeah, if you are a person that might struggle with like shy bladder syndrome, this can be a really good psychological way to like kind of pump yourself up and get you in an easy-hearted mindset. I also, if I have the ability, I like to face slightly towards what's going on where my group is. And for me, this feels less vulnerable. I know what's going on. And I also feel like people are less likely to like see what I might be exposing. With any kind of bathroom for men or women, using wag bags is definitely like a thing that comes up and a lot of people feel uncomfortable with. It's not intuitive, I would say, a lot of the time. If this sort of topic is something that like isn't as easy for you, I would totally recommend like going down to REI, purchasing a wag bag and getting comfortable using it. It's a lot easier than, busting it out at 16,000 feet when you're cold, like on a volcano in Ecuador or wherever you are. And the same for your pee funnel. Yeah, practice that at home. I think using it in the shower is a really good first place, very low stakes. Then I would move to try using it with the toilet, also pretty low stakes. And I'll just be honest that I don't personally use a pee funnel. And for the longest time, I felt like that was something that I should be doing. But if it's not right for you, if your body mechanics work differently, I just want to let you know that like you don't have to. What I would say is practice going to the bathroom with your harness on, with your layers on, and knowing if that's something that it comes easy or if using the pee funnel is right for you. I have done a fair amount of gear testing with pee funnels, and I have found that the Freshette was the easiest one for me. I will say that the Kula class are an absolute yes for me. And so I love having 2 to 3 of them with me for like 3 week long to month long expeditions, just so I have accessibility and also the ability to just change them out once I feel like one is really tired or I don't have the ability to give them a good rinse. I want to read this quote from Caroline because it's just so spot on. So she said, sounds obvious, but make sure you pee facing downhill so it runs away from you. If it's windy, try to pee in the same direction as the wind so it doesn't blow back at you. If you're squatting, perfect the height of your hover so that hard ground doesn't come back and bite you. Ladies, you know what I'm talking about. And yeah, it's like, I don't need to say anymore. All of those things are definitely very important. And at the end of the day, go pee. Don't hold it in. That can be bad for your whole health, really, whether you're in the mountains or out of the mountains. And in the mountains, it can definitely make your life a lot harder and colder. So one of my recommendations for just being able to set yourself up for success for sleeping is to hydrate early in the day. I start my day drinking a liter of water, and I try to do a lot of my hydration earlier on so that, at the end of the day, I'm not trying to catch back up and then getting woken up, having to go to the bathroom. And that said, going to the bathroom at night is really a thing that we should talk about. So, pee bottle equals more sleep, less danger. I unfortunately lost a friend in the mountains this past year in the Himalayas who went to the bathroom and went to their final resting spot. So when you're up in places where, you should be on a rope team or it's slippery or, all of the different things, going outside to use the bathroom can be life and death. So getting a pee bottle that is very well labeled is very important. And getting one that has a wide mouth. I really like to use the 1.5 liter Nalgene. I use a hard container so that I am, not at risk of accidentally like kneeling on it and having it like squirt out onto like sleeping bags and stuff. So that's what I have found to work for me. And I would say that you should practice and practicing going to the bathroom, going pee in the Nalgene while you're still inside the tent, like even getting outside into the vestibule might not be reasonable for your conditions. And a lot of the times when you're up in the mountains, it is cold. And even just the thought of having to open up that frosty, wet tent door makes me be like, yeah, I don't have to go that bad. So make it easy for yourself so you can stay in your tent. I have found that in your tent, if you're kneeling, if you have one knee up and one knee kind of dropped down, that has been the most stable position for me to be able to use my pee bottle. And also, I would recommend everyone try using a pee funnel and using it for the pee bottle. If you got it down and you're able to use your pee bottle without a funnel, good on you. But if that's not for you, just make sure that you're not putting yourself at risk of soiling your beloved sleeping pad and sleeping bag. I guess I want to do one more plug-in that speaks more to another whole capacity of myself, and it's my second career as a licensed massage therapist. I practice a Mayan lineage of abdominal therapy. And so through this lens, I have learned so much about how my unique anatomy has really affected my life and comfortability and health in the mountains. And so I just want to encourage individuals to go talk to healthcare providers. And I say providers because it does usually take a team and different lenses to understand what's going on and what exactly can support you as an individual. To go and get like your whole pelvic bowl assessed. So getting an ultrasound can be helpful in seeing if your bladder and your uterus are in optimal balanced position. And going and seeing a pelvic floor therapist can really help you reattune your muscle tone. And so that can help your whole core strength, especially if you're experiencing like incontinence. Abdominal therapy is a way of working with fascia and helping to create more space and less friction for ligaments for your organs. And so that really helps increase flow and just like restore overall balance and allow the body to heal by itself with itself. So if you're a person that is likely to get a UTI, or if you have incontinence, or if you work with painful periods, I would suggest like looking into it and finding some sort of healthcare assessment and care that can help you know what's going on in terms of your physical anatomy and just becoming more familiar with that. It's really helped support me in addition to just having more education around cycles and when it's right and when you are able to be performing well, like going back to what Lisa was talking about in her training and her resting within that, her restorative period. So I think it's pretty cool that all three of us are your panelists. Stephanie, Lisa, and I are at different stages of life. So I'm 33. I am menstruating. Stephanie, I believe you're
40.
40.
I'm 40.
Yeah, and you're in your perimenopause.
I believe nobody has told me, because nobody's going to tell me about perimenopause, but I'm here, have arrived.
Awesome. And then Lisa, I think you are on the other side and you're now in menopause. Is that right? I'll let you
Yeah,
speak
so
for
I'm
yourself.
52, so I'm still enjoying the tumultuous joy of perimenopause.
Okay.
Yeah, I will back up just a little bit because there was a question about training according to your cycle. So let me shed a little bit more light on just those 4 phases and how I think about them in terms of workouts for athletes. So starting with the menstrual phase, this is where estrogen and progesterone are the lowest in your cycle. And so this is when I really have athletes do lower intensity work. This is usually going to be a rest week for people, maybe some like mobility, walking, easy aerobic work, but nothing too strenuous during that week. And then from there, we move into the follicular phase. So estrogen is now starting to rise. We usually like start to feel our moods are a little bit better in this phase. And this is where we will do like harder strength workouts, maybe some intervals if that's on the menu for people. Usually during this phase, we're faster to recover and we have a higher tolerance for like more work in a given week. After follicular, then we ovulate. So this is when estrogen for us is the highest. And there's also a point in this phase where testosterone is the highest for us. So this is still a good time for like harder strength workouts, maybe a really long hike with a heavy backpack. There is some risk of like, because our ligaments and our joints, I think also can be looser during this time. So that's something to be aware of. But this is usually like bigger endurance, bigger climb days. And it's interesting. I'll have female athletes tell me that they'll do, if they happen to do the same strength workout when they're ovulating compared to when they're menstruating, the amount of weight that they can use changes. Like it's much lower when they're having their period than later on in their cycle. So it's like a notable difference. And that's kind of a good way to tell if you're doing the same workout and you always lift 35 pounds for this thing and you notice like, man, today I just cannot lift that weight. And I know I just did it 2 weeks ago, that you're probably very close to starting your period. And then the last phase is the luteal phase. So progesterone now is going to be the highest. Estrogen will eventually start to drop off. And so this is usually like a moderate intensity week. And as we get towards the end of that week and we're getting closer to menstruation, we'll start to taper and do lower intensity work. So it's really those 2 middle phases, follicular and ovulation, where if I can, I will organize the biggest, toughest, most intense workouts. And then the other 2 weeks of the month will be a little bit lighter. So a little more detail for those of you that are curious about syncing training with your periods or with your cycle. So speaking, gosh, I can't believe I'm the elder on this panel. I'm really having a hard time with this. I think as I moved from, like a typical cycle to being in perimenopause, one of the toughest things for me was that I wanted to perform the way I always had. It was really hard for me to accept that I wasn't as strong as I used to be. Took me more effort to build muscle. I'm certainly not as fast as I used to be. And I struggled with that for probably a year. Sought out all kinds of resources. There's a couple of great groups that we could link that focus on women who are perimenopausal and athletes. And that really helped me just understand what was going on in my body. But personally, I had to just accept that I'm not where I used to be. And when I started to just really honor what my body's telling me and where I'm at, and to be upfront with my climbing partners about that as well, like this is just what's going on with me. It was just a lot easier to kind of settle in and still enjoy where I am and what my body's capable of doing, and to also be very grateful and proud of what I've accomplished and not beat myself up because I can't do something that I used to do 10 years ago. I still get to explore and climb and do some really amazing things with my body, and I'm grateful, beyond grateful for that. So that's my perimenopause advice. We have a couple of other practical things to share. One is, and we were talking about periods. I will never forget, I got to high camp on K2 and I went to use my pee bottle and my period started. And that was not when it was supposed to start. So being aware, and I've heard this from other women, no one to my knowledge has done a study about this, but there seems to be something related to altitude and stress that can affect the timing of your period. So always carry what you need with you. I always have a couple of tampons in my first aid kit. I really like Thinx panties, which are meant to use while you're having your period. To me, that's just an easy way. I don't have to carry anything extra. They're absorbent. They don't smell. And when I've, used a pair of them, then I just fold them up and I put them in a Ziploc bag and then bring them home and take care of cleaning them later. I have other friends who like menstrual cups. I think those are a good option especially if you're on a longer trip and like disposal is going to be an issue and you want to just be able to rinse the cup and then reuse it. But, reiterating what we've said about many things, make sure you have your system dialed and you've tested it and you're comfortable with it. If I am expecting to have my period, will also bring some gloves with me and some extra Ziploc baggies just for sanitation. I just sort of have I have a bathroom kit with like wipes and TP in it. I have another kit if I think I'm going to have my period and I've got all the things I need in it. I can just grab that little bag and take care of it however I need to. There was another comment from Dr. Emily Johnston. So women will often say to me, like, I just don't want to deal with it. I don't have my period. And if you're taking birth control pills, you can skip your period. And I used to do that for many years. Emily points out a really important observation here, which is that don't start hormonal contraception just before going to altitude. It's really not recommended. The combination of altitude and shifting in hormones increases your risk of a clot. And so that's a pretty bad combo. So make sure that you've tested it. You're not new to oral contraceptives. Talk to your doctor, of course, but that's not really the time to try something new just to avoid your period when you're on the mountain. Some other perimenopause tips that I've just, it's like every day's new. You just never know what your body's going to be doing. Sleep is challenging and temperature regulation also challenging. So think about those things before you head to the mountain. Think about, do you need earplugs and eye masks, some sort of sleep aid to make sure you're getting as much sleep and recovery as you can. And, having a hot flash at 16,000 feet, as I've had, is not a very fun experience, but just be, sort of ready that those things could happen and be vocal with your team. Like Kat was saying, like just share where you're at, and your team is very often going to be supportive and understanding of whatever's going on. I think most importantly, these conversations are really important. They're not like side issues. They should be at the forefront of what we're talking about as women, because these things really affect how we show up and how we perform and how we feel out there. So keep talking about it, because then it just becomes easier for all of us, and it becomes easier for the men who are climbing with to just know what women are experiencing and what we need to be confident and comfortable in the mountains.
So Lisa, we did get a question. Any suggestions for things that women can do to help with hot flashes when they're in perimenopause and in menopause while you're out in the environment, especially in the evening. Getting sweaty in your sleeping bag is not super fun. So if you have any tips, or Lisa, if you have any tips, feel free to jump in with that. And then somebody did ask, so does this mean I can't climb because I'm in perimenopause? My golly, no.
No.
That was not the idea. It is just different. And that's just, we're
Yes.
paying respect to that. So I'm going to link in once again more on our Master's Mountaineering program and Eva Steinwald, who climbed with us just this past year on Everest. So lots of good stuff. But Lisa, do you have any tips for hot flashes?
So I am not a candidate for hormone replacement therapy. And so I've had to just manage all the stuff sort of, as it comes to me. The one thing that helped me get hot flashes under control was acupuncture. So that's not really an in the moment tip or trick, but I started working with an acupuncturist who was very, very familiar with perimenopause and temperature regulation. And he actually is able to, if I need to see him every 3 weeks, I don't have any hot flashes, I can tell when it's sort of near that 3 week period, or if I've gone beyond it, I'll start to get them. And that, once I got that under control with him, I really don't have them anymore. So acupuncture is my secret.
Okay, before we wrap up with just bringing it home back with us in the mountains, visualizing yourself here. So thinking about community, thinking about mentorship, thinking about maybe even one day becoming a guide yourself, if that is something you're interested.
Yeah, bringing it back around, I hope you continue after this webinar to continue to reflect on like what you want to bring to the mountains. And for me, being able to see other examples of like the vast diversity that people are bringing is so helpful. And it helps me know that there's space for me to be wholly me. So Facebook is a really great way to have just like, your feed that you see on the day to day, running through and seeing things that are really positive, things that you can see yourself doing from seeing other like-minded and like-bodied people doing it. So there's a lot of really good resource on Facebook. The Women of Mountaineering Facebook has a really big following. I really like the way that they structure it. And there's a fair amount of people posting in there on the day-to-day. There are also a lot of other amazing nonprofit organizations that you can join and go support or get engaged with. She Jumps is a really amazing organization. They focus on education and outdoor experiences. And I know that Stephanie just started to work on doing service on the board committee for She Jumps. Is that right?
That is, yeah.
Cool. So she's a great resource if you're interested in She Jump programs in that organization. The Awe Summit Scholarship Foundation is put on by Sunny Stroyer, who she is amazing. She's partnered with CTSS. I've worked with her on Mount Baker for all women's trips, and she's a total
I worked with her. Yep.
Yeah, and you did too. You worked for the Scholarship Foundation.
I did. Yeah.
So she's another. Stephanie, she's our go-to for getting connected. Yeah, just does such amazing stuff. Also does expeditions on Kilimanjaro, Mount Baker, Aconcagua. Danny is also a person that works for her, and she is quite amazing. She's also a guide with CTSS. They do so much fundraising. They're able to cover expedition costs, gear. Sometimes you just get totally outfitted depending on the scholarship. Like, just such amazing stuff. And Sunny is such a hoot to be around. So I can't recommend that enough. Girl Ventures is also a really great program that inspires youth to lead through outdoor adventure. They offer programs that build confidence and prepare young women specifically to lead inclusive, resilient communities and protect the natural world. Women's Wilderness is an organization that also has programs for BIPOC and LGBTQ plus girls and women to explore the outdoors, develop outdoor skills and confidence, and build community. And I do believe that all of these programs have some sort of social media or some sort of base online too. And so, even if you can't go on a program with them, I think just joining in the social media is a really great way to get linked in, find some people in your local area that you can meet up with as well. If you are excited and thinking that you want to be a mountain guide, I say yes. Totally, you should do it. And if you'd like to reach out to me individually to learn more about my experience and maybe just ask some questions, I'm so open to receiving that after this as well. The AMGA has started offering a lot of really great scholarships as well to help get more women and diverse communities in as guides and as leaders in technical terrain. I was the recipient of a 2020 Women's First Ascent Scholarship. And so I had the cost of my rock guide course covered. I had a really great experience. They also now offer all women's trainings like rock guides course, where not only are you amongst a group of all women getting the training, but also the AMGA instructors are also women. And that is like, whew, I hope that I get to be on one of those courses too in the future. They're really great. The last thing, a blog in Climbing Magazine. So I didn't actually write this, but I'm a part of it.
I keep saying you wrote it. I'm sorry. I keep saying you wrote it.
I did it. And actually,
you are in it. Yeah.
I'm in it. And it's really interesting because it is so vulnerable. And at the time, it was written in 2019, and it was written by a young woman who went and she interviewed pretty much all of like the heroes in the mountain guiding community, women that had started their own programs. Yeah, AMGA board members, people that have really been in the industry for a long time. And I felt really honored to be interviewed. I was actually down in Patagonia when they were going through the editing process. And so I didn't get a look at it until the editor had reached out to me asking for a photo. Well, it turns out what I had shared was just the depth of a very, really hard time for me. And so if you do read it, my section is very deep. And at the time, it felt so important to put those challenges about sexual harassment and emotional safety into the web of the guiding community. And so, yeah, I'm a resource. They're not my words. And I've always thought about putting some of my words out there too, and just like where I'm at now, because a lot of time has passed since then. And so there's so much that I could speak to there.
So I'm going to wrap things up here with looking at all women's climbs and spaces. Here at Climbing the Seven Summits, we love our all women's program, and we happily launched that. I think last year we launched it. And then just a couple months ago, we also launched our Master's Mountaineering program, which is for climbers 50 and older, co-ed programs. So those ones. So we're really working on finding these niche groups of people who really want to be with like-minded folks. And so we have some climbs. We've traditionally climbed on Mount Baker and Ecuador volcanoes. But Kat and Lisa, let's have you talk really quickly about the benefits of joining an all-women's team. I know you've guided these. I know you've been on them. And then I'll talk a little bit about co-ed teams as well.
The first all-women's trip that I organized was in Nepal, and it was with a group of friends, and we had all climbed extensively before and felt this like pressure to perform when we were on a mixed gender team. And so we thought it'd be really cool to go to Nepal and climb as a group of women. And I don't think we fully realized how impactful it would be. But by about day 2, we all felt just like so much more relaxed. We had like this pressure to be perfect and at our best every single day seemed to have just fallen away. And we were able to be much more vocal and vulnerable about how we were feeling and what we needed and how the climb was going for us. And so that kind of just openness, I think, is the biggest thing that I see on all women's expeditions and why I keep going back and wanting to promote more and more of them.
Yeah, for me, no 2 trips are ever the same. And I think that especially my all women's trips, they're really timely for me as an individual. I find that when I show up and I meet a group of women, kind of like going what Lisa was saying, like just to be able to be there and to be present, I felt like it was such an affirmation of being a woman at this time in life. And so our evening conversation just tend to be like more of the, as a guide, like the highlight of like, wow, women that are showing up here, they are amazing and they're so different from each other. And it's so nice to see that diversity. It really has opened my eyes as a mountaineer, as a person who, still can feel vulnerable being like, do I belong here? Like, in theory, I have the credentials, but still sometimes it's really vulnerable and scary to be showing up in the mountains. And so for me, the practice of continuing to go is just that important. And so, yeah, I think it's where a lot of friendship and community continue to be. I am constantly in WhatsApp messages with past groups of climbers from especially Mount Baker. And it's so sweet to be able to see what people are doing and what stages of life they're in, or like what new goal they're training for. And sometimes just getting that message, of like, I just did this. It's so encouraging to me. It's so encouraging to others. And likewise, we can continue to exchange, our learnings while we're out there, what the new latest gear that we're all excited about, or like, whatever it is, just keeping that community alive has been so great.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I do want to give a nod to also the co-ed trips, because a lot of us will sign up for co-ed trips still, and they're still a wonderful place. We at Climb the Seven Summits offer heaps of co-ed trips, and we're also really proud of them as well. We talked a little bit about values that your climbing operator has, and I think that's one thing that I wanted to spend a moment talking about. To start with, Climb the Seven Summits, we're proud to share that about 40% of our expeditions are made up of women. And that's a pretty high number when you kind of look at some of the other operators. Ask the folks you're interested in going with, how many women do you usually have on trips? What's your average ratio? Things like that. And hopefully they can give you an answer to help you understand what it's like. But I do want to draw attention a little bit to some of our philosophy here, because this is philosophy that we bring on every expedition. It's not just for our all women's climbs and these spaces that are safe and wonderful. All of our spaces are designed to be safe, are designed to uplift you, are designed to create the best environment for the entire team. So a couple of things. Of course, we have wonderful guides and leaderships. We specialize in the 7 summits, and our top priorities are safety and success. But what I want to really mention are the 2 things right in the middle: the marginal gains philosophy and our no dickheads policy. That's as straightforward as it can get. Marginal gains is sometimes seen as soft or a little cushy, but we actually really believe in this. We believe that really small little nuggets of good things like good food or good accommodation or a good sleeping bag is going to make or break your game out there in the mountains. And so we make an effort of feeding our folks so well, of making sure you have everything you need, because those little margins stack up to big wins. I know, Kat, you've been on Baker, and there's like bacon and real coffee happening. There's not a mountain meal in sight.
Yeah.
It's like good food. So that really matters. And then our no dickheads policy is about as straightforward as it gets. We make every climber sign this, and we have no problem holding people accountable, both guides and climbers, to our no dickheads policy. We don't have any room for that on our climbs, and we're a company built on our values right here. So we want to make sure that folks follow that and believe it and understand that this is really important to us. And so that's something that's a nod to, I believe it's the New Zealand All Blacks. That's a rugby team. They have the same policy and call it the same thing. And so we just went ahead and borrowed that and applied that to the mountaineering world, which we really like. And then here at CTSS, we understand that, of course, you got to be strong, but it's what's going on in your head. It's the mental game. It's the commitment, and it's the humility. The summit's never a given, and we recognize that at CTSS, and we're going to make the best decisions for the team while we're out there. And so we do believe that it's these types of philosophies that, whether you're in an all-women space or you're in a co-ed space, will hopefully help you to feel safe and welcomed, and that you have a voice and a place on the mountain. So I wanted to share all of that with you. And with that, I also wanted to share our contact information. Here's our Instagram, Facebook, our website, our email. I've also been just plugging my email in there, so you're welcome to reach out if you have questions about something, and I can connect you to the correct program manager to answer your questions. And then we also have free consult calls with Caroline Pemberton. She's our owner. That's her picture right there. She's Australian, which is that nod to the New Zealand All Blacks right there. And she's wonderful. Her and Mike Hamill, her husband, they own the company. But we can also state that we're 50% woman owned at that point. So they're hand in hand in this, and just really great if you want to talk about your journey, to set up that call with Caroline and chat about it and to discuss your goals. So she's super, super helpful. I will go ahead and let Kat and Lisa share their contact information.
Just that please don't hesitate to reach out. I love having these conversations. I love continuing the things that we started talking about today. And if you have questions about how to get started, how to train, nutrition, any of it, please reach out because that's how we make this whole community more confident and stronger. And to me, that's what it's really all about.
Yeah, I'll tandem that. No question is too much or too big of an ask. We're a community. I am so happy to receive emails. I think that's probably the best way that you can contact me. And yeah, totally here. It takes the whole community to be able to get us up to the summits and back home and to make sense of experiences. So in any capacity, it feels right, know that we're here for you. I would say if you have questions about training or nutrition, you should totally call Lisa first.
If you want to have some really good boat content and sailing content, follow Kat.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm being
among other things. That's awesome. I do have one follow-up question, and I think it's a great question that we didn't address. I don't know exactly where it would have fit in, but obviously some people are going on co-ed trips. And I know for safety and for warmth that oftentimes you're then sharing a tent potentially with a mixed gender person, Kat, Lisa, any thoughts on that? Do you think women should be doing single combination? Any resources for managing that mindset? Or is this something we should expect and kind of get ready for because this is just a safety concern as well, and it's a warmth concern?
Yeah, it's definitely a good one. And I think that it's something you should be prepared for if you're going on an expedition, even if you're thinking about when you're going to have to share a tent on the mountain and maybe there's two women at the start, but maybe one of you turns around or you end up on a different schedule and it's possible that you could have to share a tent with a guy. I think it's important to be very vocal about I need 20 minutes in the tent right now because I need to take a little wet wipe shower and get cleaned up and go to the bathroom and I need you to leave. And vice versa. So communication, like most things, is really key in those situations. There's still gonna be times where you wake up in the middle of the night and you've got to use your pee bottle and it's 20-mile-an-hour winds outside and you're not going to leave the tent and you've just got to be discreet about it. I tell people very often, nobody wants to watch you pee or poop or any of those things, right? They want to give you the discretion you need. It's often just up to us to say what we need. That said, if you're ever feeling unsafe or there's just someone that you don't get good vibes from and you don't want to be alone with them in a tent or on a rope, that's important to say to your guides as well so that other accommodations can be made so that everyone in the team feels comfortable and strong and like they're, there to climb and not have to worry about other things like that.
I love that. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah. So using your voice, speaking up, ladies, don't be afraid. If you're not comfortable with something, different accommodations can be made. You all can hopefully figure that out. So speaking up, just like we were talking about earlier. Well, folks, I do think this is wrapping up now. If you have any other ideas on that all women's page, we also have a place where you can email us or submit, hey, we'd love to see this. We want this program to be designed for you. And also we want to listen to where you all want to be climbing, what resources you need, things like that. Kat and Lisa, you all have been rock stars.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun to share. I appreciate it.
Yeah, grateful to be a part of this community. Excited for everyone. And yeah, go out there, get after it, and don't be shy.
Perfect. Awesome.
Reach out or out there.
I like it. Awesome. So folks, on behalf of Climbing the Seven Summits, I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever it is. Take care, and hopefully we'll see you soon at our next webinar. Bye.